Hi everyone, I'm Jenna.
Hi, I'm Katie.
And we're the co-founders of Girls Driving for a Difference, as Mark mentioned. We're a team of women from Stanford University with a mission to empower middle school girls across America to become leaders of social change. Now, as Mark mentioned, this is both an outer and an inner journey. And when we talk about a journey, we're talking about a road trip. So last June, we jumped in an RV and crossed the United States running design thinking and leadership workshops with over 1,200 middle school girls. That's our team. And over the course of 14 weeks, we drove 11,000 miles in our RV, crossed 30 states, and ran these 53 workshops that you see on our summer roadmap. We're excited to be back in New York today, and although we didn't take the RV, we do have our two awesome teammates, Rachel and Natalia, in the audience, so I hope you all get a chance to meet them today too.
Cool. So to kick things off, we want you guys to step inside the shoes of your middle school selves. When you were in middle school, what did you want to be when you grew up? Go ahead and take a couple seconds to think about it, and then we'd love to see a show of hands. Raise your hand if you were right. Your ideas in middle school actually became a reality. You're doing exactly what you thought you'd be doing. Okay, we got a hand. Nice. Okay. Raise your hand if your ideas were a little bit different. Let's say you're doing something pretty different from what you initially thought. A lot more hands. Amazing. And raise your hand if you are still figuring it out. Great. So this is something that we're still figuring out too. And we think this question is really interesting because it's asking for one very explicit answer, like doctor or lawyer or writer or musician, when in fact the process of figuring out who you are and the kind of change you want to make in the world is much more complex than that. In fact, it's a lifelong conversation, and it's one that we wanted to spark with middle school girls in a way that felt really inspiring and open-ended. So we started asking them a very different question. And that was, what kind of change do you want to create in the world, and how can you begin to use your strengths to achieve that dream today? And we found that this question was especially important when we asked middle school girls.
So middle school can be a rough time. I think we all can agree on that. It's a time when these questions about the future and your place in them, they get really real. And you're starting to become super aware of all these problems in the world, but maybe you don't yet feel like you have a place in solving them. And research shows that especially for girls at this age, between 10 and 13, this is a time when their confidence levels drop and their insecurities rise. You know, it's when girls, they stop raising their hand in class and a lot of them start straightening their hair before school. And a stat that really stood out to our team last fall was that while 73% of girls between the ages 10 and 13 say they really want to make a change in the world around them, over a third say they don't think they have what it takes to actually be a leader of that change. And we thought, we've got to do something about that. But how? So the four of us met as students at the Stanford D School, where we had the opportunity to take a lot of classes and work on a lot of projects using the design thinking method, a creative problem-solving method for creating social change. And we really came to see this process not just as a really powerful tool for creating that change out in the world, but also as a powerful process for growing as leaders ourselves. And we thought, how can we bring this tool and this experience to girls at an even younger age? And as Katie and I and the team, we were bouncing off ideas, this dream grew and grew. And we thought, we don't want to just reach girls in the Bay Area of California. We want to take this all across the country. And what better way to do that than to show up in their hometowns in a super colorful RV. So this is us halfway through the summer, but getting from that initial dream to this reality was a 6-month-long process of getting together the right resources and people who also shared this vision.
And one of the biggest steps towards achieving this dream was launching a Kickstarter fundraising campaign that I know Mark was able to mention before our talk. This was our way of gathering not only financial support to actually jump on the road and coach all of these workshops for free wherever we went, but also gathering the community support so that wherever we went, from point A to point B, we had point people within those communities who could help us really meet the girls that we wanted to reach. And today we wanted to share the first 30 seconds of our Kickstarter fundraising video.
Guys, you will never believe this. So there are these 4 girls from Stanford. It's Katie, Jenna, Natalia, and Rachel. And they're doing a road trip this summer.
They're driving around the entire country.
From California to New York. They're teaching design thinking workshops. In the workshops, we tell stories.
Prototype!
Make mission statements. It's all about changing the world.
Awesome. Yeah, so they're adorable. I mean, they're wonderful, and we got to hang out with them all summer, which was so rewarding. And the Kickstarter, as we mentioned, was our major step towards really bringing this to life. And along the way, we were prototyping these workshops throughout the Bay Area.
So we started off prototyping these workshops with a basic structure in mind, where the first hour and a half was this team-based design thinking challenge where they're solving a problem together in a group. And then in the last 30 minutes, we shifted towards actually applying that process as individuals to how they could use that to make a change they care about out in their communities. And one of the first times we tested this was at the girls' middle school in Palo Alto. And there was one girl who really stood out to us. Maya rocked the design thinking challenge. She made awesome prototypes, and she was telling these stories, and she illustrated her whole packet. And then she got to the leadership section, and her demeanor just totally shifted. There was a section of the packet that asked her to write down, what are your skills? What are you good at? And after 5 minutes, Maya's page was blank, and I won't forget the moment when she looked up at us and she said, "I'm just not good at anything." And now we could see that that wasn't true. And the other girls in the room also knew that wasn't true. And they jumped in immediately and were like, "Maya, but you're so good at robotics, and you're playing such a cool role in the school play." And they were going on and on about all the ways that Maya was amazing. And the only person who couldn't see how amazing Maya was Maya. So we shifted our original question that we were asking from how might we bring design thinking as a tool to these girls to how might we guide them to celebrate and recognize the tools they already have and see how they could use those to actually impact their world. So we went from this model to one that really prioritized leadership. And instead of using design thinking as the focus, it was now kind of the lens through which we're approaching this big question.
So that eventually turned into a 2-hour-long workshop called Find Your Drive. This is actually the front page of a workshop packet that we gave to each girl as she showed up for the workshop. And the workshop itself was broken up into a couple major parts. The first one was a brainstorm relay race. So we broke girls up into teams, and we hung posters around the room, half that said hometown and the other half that said world. And we had girls run with their teams between the posters, coming up with as many ideas for problems that existed and applied to both their hometown and the world. And at the end of the exercise, we had a room covered with posters that looked a little bit like this. Really big problems that the girls were coming up with. And at first, as facilitators, we feel great about the relay race. It's great to see girls so excited to be coming up with different ideas and really exploring meaningful issues that they know exist in the world, but don't usually talk about at school or with their families. And on the other hand, we see the energy level in the room change. We see the girls look around this room covered with problems, and it starts to feel a little bit daunting. We had one girl come up to us and say, I'm just a girl, I'm just one person. How do you expect me to stop world hunger, to solve pollution? And we realized that that wasn't the point. It wasn't about solving a world problem. It was about looking towards a future that you wanted to create and making your own small change towards that future you wanted to see. So we went through an exercise of turning problems into opportunities. So instead of choosing pollution as a problem you wanted to solve, a girl would choose a future like everyone can have fresh air and water, and instead work towards that. And we saw the whole energy in the room change. Girls' faces would light up. This was the trick to really getting to what they needed to hear. And for the rest of the workshop, girls would hold on to these opportunity statements, and the rest of the workshop was then dedicated towards helping girls identify the strengths and skills that they already had towards bringing that opportunity to life.
So we started off with activity strengths, kind of hard skills. And we already knew from Maya that it can be hard to say what you're good at, not just because it's hard to think of them, but even as an adult, sometimes it's uncomfortable to say it. I'm good at this. So we designed a really fun game where they would choose between a bunch of different pairs of these skills. And as soon as they chose, they were all standing in a circle. They would shout it out, and they would write it on a Post-it note. And then after each pair, they would put that Post-it note on their body until by the very end, they all looked like this in awesome green outfits covered in their skills. And I remember there was this one workshop in June. We were just starting to get on the road, and we were at Camp Kesem. And we saw a very familiar face in one of our workshops, and it was Maya. And seeing Maya at the end of this section, literally wearing all of the things that she's good at and proudly shouting them out, we knew that she could see herself a little bit more clearly. So after the girls have chosen these 3 activity strengths, these things they can do with their brain or their body that they feel like are the most them, we shift into talking about leadership strengths, things that are about who they are and how they interact with other people. And we structured this around one thing that middle schoolers can't resist, a personality quiz. And personality quiz looked a little bit like this. They would pass them around in their team. And by the very end, they choose one of 4 leadership styles that they feel like they identify with the most, and 3 of the leadership strengths that go with those styles. Now, the 4 of us in the RV also happen to fall into one of these 4 categories. And over the course of summer, we were learning so much about the strengths and challenges that you face as being one of these leadership colors. And we saw this as a really important time to sit down with the girls and start to bring up that conversation. We learned that getting girls to say, I'm compassionate or I'm organized was one thing, but getting girls to actually associate those traits with leadership was an important next step. So I'm a radio, so I'm the pink one, and I would sit with my pink group and we would talk about compassion, empathy, teamwork, and listening, which were the leadership strengths we had associated. And going around the circle, each girl would tell a story about a time when she showed one of those traits. And sometimes the stories were about theater rehearsal, and sometimes they were about caring for a suicidal friend. But for most of them, these moments, they hadn't really thought of them before as moments of leadership. And that was one of the most important values that we were able to learn for ourselves and share with the girls this summer. Becoming a leader isn't always about learning new skills. Sometimes it's about recognizing the skills you already have and valuing them as powerful tools for change.
Cool. So at this point in the workshop, we've come up with opportunities that we're driving for. We've also identified hard and soft skills that we have towards really making that opportunity come to life. And we bring all 3 of these areas together in these mission statements. And we were lucky enough to hear tons of inspiring mission statements around the country from these girls, and it just wouldn't be right if we didn't share any of them with you today. We have one from Tatiana, who's 11, bringing together my strengths in photography and persuasiveness. I'm driving for a future where people feel proud of their race and culture and respect one another. We have Arabella at 13, who said, bringing together my strengths in robotics and public speaking. I'm driving for a future where girls have the same opportunities as boys. We have Sophie, who's 12. She said, bringing together my strengths in digital art and confidence. I'm driving for a future where young people feel safe on social media and in public. And for us, we left these mission statements feeling pretty moved, but we also wanted to end the workshop in a way that really felt like the energy was building up to something great. So we had all of the girls come together, literally stand up on a chair and declare their mission statement as loudly as they could in front of the rest of the girls while everyone else cheered them on. We lost our voices just consistently throughout the summer. And for some girls, this was a huge moment of transformation. There's one girl, Eliza, who we remember from Dallas, who came into the workshop with what we call a cool card, which means that she was physically there, but emotionally not really ready to engage yet. She had sunglasses on and her hair was kind of covering her face, and she was taking a step back, didn't seem really willing or excited to participate in any of the activities that we had set out. And for us, being able to give some one-on-one attention to girls like her and see this transformation at the end of the workshop after 2 hours was phenomenal, and it was something that we really carried with us throughout the summer. We also handed out these notebooks where girls could use the front page to write down their mission statement, keep it with them, remember it forever. We cross our fingers for that. And also use the rest of the pages to explore and come up with even more ideas for bringing that mission statement to life in different ways. And that led also into a texting service called Journal with GDD, which is GDD being Girls Driving for a Difference, where we could send them different prompts that would help them start to think about their mission statements in different ways. And also just check in with them. Say we had done a workshop in Seattle and we had made it to New York City. How's that girl from Seattle doing? How's that mission statement really coming to life?
And sometimes it was hard for us to guess which mission statements would come to life, but it was always fun to hear from the girls when they would. And we try to think about, which of these problems seems the most likely to come true. And, there was one problem that we saw so often, and we had our doubts about it. You'll see so many problems on here, super real problems, from prejudice to poverty. And you'll also see, if you look carefully, maybe 3 times on this board, the phrase animal abuse. And not that animal abuse is not a problem, but we started to get kind of frustrated with how often girls would choose animal abuse. So many of the girls in every workshop. And it got to the point where, a few weeks into the summer, a girl would be choosing between, LGBT rights and animal abuse, or poverty and animal abuse. And time and again, they would choose animal abuse. And in our heads, we'd be like, no, not animal abuse again. And that was, until we met these 2 girls in Nashville. Their names were Brooklyn and Savannah. And, they both wrote their mission statements about animal abuse with their best friends. And then a couple weeks later, we weren't sure what was going on, how that was going to progress. They texted us, and they were like, we're still really excited about animal abuse and changing that. And so they made these car magnets and texted us pictures of them. And this is a small step, but it did represent something that they had told us during the workshop too, which was when we asked them why they were choosing this problem of puppy mills, they said, because they're helpless and we can help. Like that actually is a powerful sentiment that actually does lead to action. And for us, I remember thinking, okay, so for us, the people we want to help is middle schoolers. And maybe when you're a middle school girl, who you want to help is puppies.
And sometimes the impact that we made was less directly based on those mission statements they had come up with, and more about building confidence and connection. There was one community that really stood out from Bend, Oregon, where we visited a correctional school and worked with dozens of really inspiring young women and shared some really intimate and serious conversations about the issues that they were facing and the challenges that they had both in their personal and academic lives. I remember at the end of the workshop, some of the girls came out to see the RV and were giving us hugs. One of the girls actually faced our team and said, "This is the moment and the day that I've been waiting for all year." And to hear that from her really took us back. It was a moment of, as a design student, I want to ask, oh, was it the BRAINSTORM relay race, or was it really activity strengths? Was that it? And I had to take a step back and realize that it wasn't the point. It didn't matter which activity created that impact. The point was that she was facing us then in that moment and describing the ways that she felt different about her future and her abilities. We also realized from this workshop how important it was to continue those conversations that we had started with girls in the workshops. And that's where that texting service really came in handy. There was one girl, Mackenzie, from that Bend workshop who texted us about a week later. We were in Seattle at the time. And she texted us talking about how inspired she felt and how she'd been able to step outside of her shell. And those little moments for us really made a difference. As you can imagine, we're in the RV going from point A to point B, and we're responding to these texts all the time. Let's say Natalia's at the wheel, taking us to our next community stop. Jenna might be in the back in our kitchen, which is not really a kitchen because you're in an RV, but it's the closest thing we've got. And she's microwaving another bag of brown rice so that she can spoon feed Natalia as she drives. It happens. Rachel might be on the back sofa on the phone with our next community stop. And at this point, it's my turn to be sitting in the passenger seat, texting these girls and sharing with the rest of the team how things are going.
Now, we set up this texting service because we knew we were going to want to stay in touch with the girls after our brief time with them. But I don't think we ever could have expected how hard it was sometimes to drive away from these communities just when these relationships were getting started. And this really hit home for me one day in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I was like on a high coming out of this workshop. I really bonded with my team. We were called the Aquapan Unicorn Dragons, and we had all kinds of real talks, and we had dance breaks, and at the end, we all stuck our mission statements up on the wall, and we Congo lined out to the RV blasting Katy Perry. And if you're curious what an Aquapan Unicorn Dragon is, there it is. And it was drawn by a very special girl named Zoe, and we had really bonded during the workshop. And after most of the girls were gone, Zoe was still waiting to be picked up, so I waited with her outside the YWCA while the rest of the team was cleaning up inside. And at first we're just like chatting and joking and taking selfies, and then it gets a little bit serious and she starts to open up to me. She tells me matter-of-factly how things are getting really hard at home. Like her brother has a lot of problems and her family's fighting a lot and her friends don't want to come over anymore. And as I'm talking to her, I'm also thinking, like, how can I help Zoe? Like we're leaving tomorrow. Like, can I be her big sister? And really like going through my head is, how do I say goodbye now? And we're sitting there for about another 30 minutes, and finally a car pulls up, and of course, Zoe's mom. And so I walk up and I shake her hand, and I'm hugging Zoe goodbye, and I'm making sure Zoe has our contact information, and the mom has Jen's information, our contact at the YWCA. And this whole time I'm just thinking, like, we suck. Like, we suck. How do we do this? How do we just leave? Like, we have to come up with a more sustainable solution. And I would love to end the story saying, like, and we did. Like, magical, we came up with a sustainable solution, and we didn't. Honestly, I walked back inside and I cried with the team, and I thought about girls like Zoe for the rest of the summer, hoping that the short amount of time we spent with them was at least enough to move the needle. Luckily, I was being a little bit egotistical, and we were just one part of the equation.
For example, within that same community in North Carolina, there were 4 different organizations that were previously disconnected, but that came together to help us make 4 workshops happen in 2 days. And still today, 8 months later, these women are still working together to try to continue the conversations that we started. And sometimes the impact happened with individual volunteers who were able to join our workshop and help facilitate. There was one instance in Nashville where there was a guy named Tony who walked in right before the workshop started. And at that point, we had already matched up all of these facilitators with different team tables, but he said, hey, I'd love to sit in and maybe take some photos. And we said, sure, that'd be great. And we didn't think twice about it until about a month later, we got tagged with a notification on Twitter by Tony, who had written a post on Medium called What Girls Driving for a Difference Taught Me About Empowerment, Leadership, Social Change, and My Daughter. There was one quote from the article that really stood out. This workshop has left such an impression on me that I haven't stopped talking about it since. It got me thinking, how might my wife and I use design thinking to foster social change with our own 3-year-old daughter?
Now, Katie read this to me as I was driving through Zion. I remember this just being a huge whoa moment for me. Like, there's nothing in our mission statement about fathers of toddlers. But we realized that you just cannot guess or predict where the spark of this conversation will take root. You can't measure that impact, and unless someone takes the time to blog about it, you may never know how you affected them. In fact, in many cases, they might never know it either. And that was true for us too. Every mile of the journey, we were affecting one another as a team, impacting each other in ways like we are still finding out today, ways that we have grown because of these people who were our coworkers and our best friends and our travel buddies and sometimes our worst enemies, but not usually. And you're living together 24/7, and this experience has continued to change us. And the conversations that we were starting with girls in these workshops are the ones that continued into the RV long after, and that we're still continuing today as a team and as individuals, and hopefully now with more people like you. So where are we today?
So, it's been such an incredible experience, both teaching these workshops as facilitators, but also working with these younger women. And it's now our goal to be able to share both of those experiences with as many other community leaders and younger girls as we can. So we've been building a teaching toolkit that has our workshop totally packed into it that enables community leaders to take our workshop and bring it to communities of their own. This notebook guide is just one piece of it that takes you through the workshop step by step, so you literally know what to say as you coach it. It's been such an incredible journey. I feel honored to be a part of this team and to be here today to share with you some things that we've learned. And it's a journey that we're still on and one that we invite you to become part of. So thank you so much.
Thank you.